deluge of rain, a safety car start, chaos in the pit lane, and a rookie momentarily taking the lead. That was some sprint race we've just seen here in Belgium. Let's unpack it all as Max Verstappen wins the Belgian Grand Prix sprint race. Welcome to Will Buxton alongside me, and welcome to the upper level of this paddock. And behind us, you can see the media pen, where the drivers are currently telling the world's media exactly what went down in that incredibly eventful, chaotic race. Will Buxton, how did you see it?
Well, it was only 11 laps in the end, so it was all condensed down into just those real sort of intense 11 laps. Of course, we had so many formation laps behind the safety car because of the deluge that hit literally as we were leaving the grid after the pre-show, which delayed the start by some time, and then the safety car going out just until the spray had really been cut down to be acceptable to go back to racing. Because, of course, all we've seen so far this weekend is qualifying. And in qualifying, the cars are far more spread apart. You get far less spray. But in racing conditions, cars really close together. Spray is such an important factor. So just to be safe, but by the time the safety car did come in, it was almost pretty much exactly time to move from the full wet to the intermediate tyres. A number of drivers determined to do that as the race got back underway, some including Max Verstappen waited a lap later, and that's what shook up the order. That's what gave us the excitement. Oscar Piastri leading a race in Formula One for the first time, and I've got to say, doing a brilliant job of it.
Oh, absolutely, and that was just it, wasn't it? It was pitting at the start, so one driver from each team pitted and one stayed out, and it was kind of the gamble, wasn't it, whether it would pay off, and indeed how lucky or unlucky you were going to be in the pit lane, obviously, because we saw a fair amount of close calls in there, shall we say.
Yeah, and what was fascinating about this, and what really changed the dynamic of who pitted when, was it was a rolling start. Now, if it had been a standing start, I think that the lead drivers from each team would have probably come in first, like Max Verstappen. I think probably would have come in, or it might have been a sort of a different weighting of who would have come in. But to see the drivers that did come in when they did, obviously the teams who were running line astern didn't want to double stack, so they'd wait for the second lap. And you got some real great shake-ups in there. Particularly, I'm thinking of Pierre Gasly, who absolutely leapt through the positions as Carlos Sainz fell back. So great for him, great for Alpine as well with that. But it really did sort of shake up the order at that time, and putting Oscar Piastri into the lead was, it wasn't really a gamble from McLaren. It was 1000% the right call. Put him into the lead, and then even with the safety car which came out after that, I thought he held it together incredibly well. Very calm, very confident, and drove absolutely beautifully. These then, the first drivers to come in and stop: Carlos Sainz, Oscar Piastri, Gasly, Hamilton, Checo Perez as well, all coming in. And a number of drivers having to take the slower stop. For Piastri, absolutely simple, in and out, one of the benefits of being so far down the pit lane. But for another couple of drivers, fairly difficult for them. We saw with the Alpine of Gasly coming out almost into the path of Fernando Alonso. We saw the same thing when Charles Leclerc came in the next lap for Ferrari. You can just about get drivers side by side, but I've got to say I did find it interesting that there were no calls at all to even investigate unsafe releases in the pit lane. Well, they weren't even investigated, which I found quite strange.
Yeah, because I made note of a few, thinking, preempting the FIA to stand in then and say, oh, an unsafe release here, an unsafe release there. I mean, Max Verstappen, it seemed a slow stop initially, but actually what it was holding, and it was so well judged as Lando Norris there came in.
But so they held him once and then let him go, and that could have been very nasty indeed. Real shock not to see that even investigated. But let's say an interesting day of decisions from the FIA with the penalty for Hamilton, which I'm sure we'll come on to at a certain point in time. Some let's say intriguing calls today.
Some interesting ones. Kevin Magnussen there just walking through the back of shot. Not a day for Haas, but signing autographs nevertheless for fans here who are flocking around this media pen behind us.
Well, Kev at one point, I think, was trying to get the team to put him onto slicks.
Oh, and he was. Yeah, he was saying it was possible.
He was so far back. He was, that was the kind of team, that was the kind of opportunity, I thought, for someone to roll a dice. I know at that time, though, there was another little pocket of rain just starting to come in, and so the team may have been looking at that and thinking, let's not risk it. But honestly, in a sprint, when you're that far back in the order, you've got to roll the dice. You've got to try something. So disappointed not to see them try the slick. But I think with how wet the track actually ended up being, probably would have been too early, just a bit.
Yeah, just a tire. We don't want to see anybody else in the wall. Of course, Fernando Alonso with a spin into the wall. Checo Perez, of course, also retiring, beaching it into the gravel and then coming back out. But obviously, Red Bull choosing to DNF for Sergio Perez. Let's take a look at Fernando Alonso's spin. Uncharacteristic for a driver of his experience, of his sheer brilliance for this to happen. Just hearing we actually don't have that. So there we go. We won't unpack it at all. Let's unpack it for us, Will.
Yeah. I think what it showed was, here we go, we got it. Just a tyre over onto the curbing, hits the white line, and it spins him around. Now, this is a driver who is having a frustrating weekend. He's having a frustrating time of it at this part of the season as well. The season that started off so brilliantly for Aston Martin, and every race we came to, even if it wasn't quite what he'd expected or quite what he'd wanted, the optimism, the faith, the confidence in his car and in his team was there. That has dissipated over the last few Grand Prix, as they now admit they've made a wrong turn in terms of the development of that car. They had all of that development time. Such an advantage over the other teams because of where they finished last season in 7th place. All of that additional time, and they've squandered it on taking the wrong developmental path with that car. And Fernando, when things are going well, is a joy. When things aren't going well, Fernando starts to tighten the bolts and the pressure starts to ramp up, and you can see in his general demeanor when he's being talked to in the media pen, just the way that he handles himself when he's walking around the paddock, that stress level in him is starting to increase, and you know that there are going to be some pretty serious words behind the scenes. That's not an at-ease Fernando Alonso that was driving out there today. He was driving tense. And you don't see mistakes like that from Fernando very often.
No, you don't, do you? It's fascinating to see. I was going to say earlier on, we heard him speaking to Lawrence Barretto, not happy at all after the shootout, and I can't imagine he's going to be much happier now. Here he is.
Hey, Fernando, it looked like you just put a wheel on the curb and just kind of got out of shape. What is it? What it was like behind the wheel?
Yeah, my mistake. I touched the curb or the white line or whatever, and I lost the car. I was very close to Nico, so I lost a little bit of rhythm into that corner. We were out of the points anyway. I think today impossible to be in the top 8. So yeah, if one time you have to have a DNF, maybe better today than any other day.
How tricky were the conditions out there, and kind of just judging what, where you could push and where you couldn't push? Yeah,
it was tricky. Obviously, we've been the whole weekend finding the grip and guessing what the grip is in each of the corners. I think the race, it was not different because every lap the track improvement is massive. So yeah, it was tricky also with all the cars. Obviously, the visibility was very different than qualifying, so it was tricky.
Okay, so thank you.
A different Fernando Alonso to the one we saw post-shootout when asked, what can you do in the sprint? He said nothing and walked away from Lawrence sort of mid-question. They're able, I think, just to reflect and take a beat and kind of just look back on what was a difficult day, and indeed on his birthday as well. I know that doesn't count for much, when you're 42 and you're a racing driver, but not the ideal way to spend it, is it?
Well, I don't know. There are worse things in life than driving Grand Prix cars, I'm sure. But, look, were it a Grand Prix, were it tomorrow that it ended in that kind of a fashion, I think he'd be a little bit more down. As he said, we weren't scoring points today anyway, so, it is what it is.
It is. Let's talk about the moment that Max Verstappen retook the lead, of course, of this race. He lost the 1 position to Oscar Piastri, choosing to pit in the second lap rather than straight in. But the way he retook that lead was ballsy, my goodness me. Pinned up Eau Rouge right at the back of Oscar Piastri. It was something. Supreme was the word I think you uttered when we were watching it, Will.
I think I shouted.
I think you did, yeah.
And it was. This is just the end of it. Where you really need to be is on board from the exit of La Source, because what he does is picks up from right behind him, blasts down into Eau Rouge. Do you know what? We've got Fred Vasseur, so I'll stop talking about that and we'll talk to you. Fred, an unexpected pickup of an extra place today with Lewis having that penalty. How happy are you with the result for both of your cars today?
It was mathematically it's a good one for us because we score more points than Mercedes and Aston Martin. At the end, it was a strange race because I think it was dictated by the pace into the pit lane more than something else. Not even the pace of the pit stop, but more the pace of the traffic. But it is like it is. We have to take the good side of today, that we score good points. and to be focused on tomorrow because we'll start in a good position.
I know we had mixed conditions today, Fred, mixed conditions yesterday, expecting potentially dry tomorrow. Have you managed to learn anything from today to take into tomorrow in terms of
I'm not sure
race
that
pace?
you can learn something from today. That
Is that a no?
but yeah, no, that we score good points. That's it. No, that for tomorrow, the way on the way the conditions are so different in Spa that you can't learn from one day to the other one. Except that today, that after a couple of laps, we started with the X-weight, we put in there, and after 5 laps, that it was ready for sticks.
Yeah.
That it, at the end for the drivers, it was more race management and tire management than something else.
Given that there's been no proper dry running this weekend, it's always been wet drying on track. Do you want a wet race tomorrow that's drying, or would you rather have a dry even though there's been no proper dry running?
We love what we love.
But what would you like, Fred?
No, but I think starting from the front, that probably the dry race is easier to manage, and we had a good pace with slicks, and I'm quite optimistic on this condition. But you know that it makes no sense to spend your life to do weather forecast in Spa. I think it's
Great stuff. Thank you very much, Fred.
Thank you.
Thanks for
And
coming
good
up.
luck for
Ciao, ciao.
tomorrow.
Ciao, ciao.
Of course,
Thanks,
Charles
Fred.
Leclerc starting from pole position. Thanks to Fred.
I love that man.
In such good form, in pure Fred Vasseur form there, wasn't he?
Yeah, absolutely adore that man. He is just such a breath of fresh air at Ferrari. I think, you know, it is a fabled, storied team, but one that has always taken itself very, very seriously. So to have somebody who is able to shut out the noise of the pressure and the media and the expectation that comes with one of the most high-pressure jobs in all of world sport, and to be able to laugh at himself is, part of the man's personality that I think will help him very much in that role. I've got a lot of time for it. A lot of time for him. We were talking about Max's beautiful pass. As you said, set it up coming out of La Source. And Oscar actually went to defend. And so spray was being kicked up, but Max just swerved to the right, took the perfect line coming into Eau Rouge, swept through, got back into Oscar's wheel tracks, Oscar was slightly offline going in there anyway, so was always going to just have to back out a little bit towards the top. But Max, to have the confidence in the wet to go through in the dirty air, in the wheel tracks, through the spray, through Eau Rouge, through Raidillon, and just, even without DRS, just straight past. It was gutsy, it was confident, it was the kind of move that he probably didn't need to make. He could have waited, got the DRS and did it, but that's just the supreme confidence of your World Championship leader right now. It was glorious to see.
Yeah, and it seems he had a lot of grip out there as well. He was one of 6 drivers who pitted onto new Inters rather than used Inters. And other drivers making moves were the 2 Ferraris, both on Sergio Perez, who had a pretty torrid sprint race out there. But let's hear now from Charles Leclerc.
Charles being the second of the team's cars to be on the grid today, I guess it was always going to be difficult when everyone wanted to box early doors. Considering that, is it kind of an all right result from where you ended up?
Yeah, honestly, we did it was the right decision, but unfortunately for me, it wasn't the best decision for me. But I understand there was no other ways of doing it. If I would have stopped behind Carlos, I would have lost much more. So we did the right decision as a team, but unfortunately for me, it didn't pay off. And then we also had a slow stop on my side, which is where we need to look at, because it's been few races that now we've been struggling a little bit more on pit stops. Before that race, in terms of statistics, we were still the best team, but it's been the last 2-3 races have been more difficult for us in terms of pit stops. So we need to look into it, as now it's a bit more of a concern.
I know you haven't had a lot of learnings this weekend and track conditions, but you got a bit of that in that race. Do you think that might help tomorrow if it rains again, and did the car feel good?
The car definitely felt overheated, and it was very difficult to keep the tire temperatures under control. But tomorrow will be very different. I think if it's completely dry, whatever we learned today won't be very useful for tomorrow's race.
Okay, thank you.
Great to hear there from Charles Leclerc. Even better to hear from Daniel Ricciardo in person. Welcome along. How are you doing?
I'm all right. I'm doing good. For a few laps, I thought maybe we could get some points. We're in 8th for I don't know, maybe 2 laps. But yeah, that was fun. We lost a bit of pace at the end. But in general, I'm enjoying it. I'm enjoying being back in the sport, and it was a little sooner than probably I anticipated, but I've enjoyed the first 2 weekends.
We were talking yesterday during quali about the fact you tried to keep it pinned in the wet through Eau Rouge, second weekend back. That we loved because it showed Daniel Ricciardo was back and confident and happy.
Made me happy too.
How good does that feel though we've talked about it so much in the past, to have that feeling back in there and that smile back and genuinely be loving it?
You should be my hype man. That felt good. It's yeah, I mean, on one hand, obviously, I was so disappointed to make the mistake yesterday, but I got back to my room and I was like, you know what? It's good. It's good because I obviously feel something in the car, and as you said, like that desire is there, and you know that aggressive approach, if you want to call it that, is there, and so yeah, the intentions were right, and obviously it didn't pay off, but I'd rather that than cruise around a second slower.
Because people have said it's the worst car in the field right now. Does it feel like that, or does there feel like there's potential in it?
I think there's potential in it. You know, I think the first lap I did in Budapest, very first lap, so first lap in the car, I already felt like, oh yeah, like I can get some confidence out of this, and I think the general balance is not too bad. I think we are lacking downforce and overall load. So, of course, in F1 that goes from making a car great to mediocre if you don't have downforce. But I think it's something to work with. And as I said, the balance, the feeling. I think in 2 weekends I've probably had every condition under the sun, and I've felt relatively comfortable in all conditions. So I think that's a sign as well that the car is relatively well balanced. And we call bad cars other names. I don't think it's one of those names.
That's good to hear. Look, Daniel, P9 today, and I think every single F1 fan out there would have been hoping that you'd have held on for that 1 point in just your second race weekend back.
Yeah.
Talk me through that fight with George Russell. We've got it here for you to have a watch through as well.
I'm not going to correct you. I was 10th in the end. Ocon got me right at the end, but I prefer 9th. It sounds good, so I'm just going to say, yep, 9th. George was coming through quick. I did make a little mistake in the last chicane, trying to, obviously defend. So that gave him a bit better chance, but once he passed me, he quickly left me. So I think it was a matter of time. So I tried, didn't hold on, and try again tomorrow.
Grand Prix tomorrow, obviously starting from the back.
Yeah.
Dry race, wet race, what do you want?
I want a dry race just so I can do some laps in the dry here. It is such a cool track. I've had enough laps in the wet for a weekend, so a dry race would be fun just to enjoy it and obviously feel the car a bit more in those conditions on the limit, and try to keep giving the team some feedback and learning more for myself as well.
Daniel, you've clearly kept in great shape. You know, third driver for Red Bull. You've kept on it, but physically, how are you feeling? Yeah, you're very welcome. Physically, how are you feeling? How was the neck after Hungary, and how did you feel coming into this weekend? And similarly, after 2 qualifying sessions and a sprint race as well.
I think I feel good. I feel I was definitely a little bit nervous, you know, especially with Budapest. It's one of the most physical ones of the year. So for that to be my first weekend back, I wasn't sure how I was going to go. But yeah, I think, you know, from a few months already, I've been, let's say, ramping up the training. And again, it's something that I've been doing on my own terms. It's something that I've been waking up in the morning and wanting to do it. And I think that was also important for me coming back into the sport, making sure that it's really coming from me. It's not someone pushing me to do it or convincing me you should keep racing, you know. So all these things have been really good. And I think, I've been training well, I've been training hard, and Budapest was good. I remember getting to halfway through the race, and I was expecting by that point to kind of wish for a checkered flag, but actually I finished the race still with a bit of energy, so things are good.
That's awesome to hear.
We've got to let you go, but just really quickly, you know there's historics going around at the moment. Have you seen your HRTs down there?
No way!
Yeah,
is it really?
Yeah.
Oh.
You've been to see you've got to go and see the old girl.
The old girl. Couldn't have said it better myself. Yeah, I will. That's a memorable time. I remember when I know I talk a lot, sorry for going
No, we
on.
love it, carry on.
I think Fabi's about to kill us or you.
When I got to Silverstone for the first time and I was driving my first race with HRT, I remember like looking at the car and trying to convince myself like, oh yeah, like it's got some downforce and why, I don't know, it doesn't look like it's 4 seconds off the pace. So I remember trying to convince myself that it was going to be fast, but yeah, anyway, I'm still grateful for that experience.
Oh, we're grateful too.
We're grateful for your experience coming on here,
Absolutely.
mate. Thank you so much.
Daniel, thank you. We loved having you as co-host a few times on F1 TV. We love having you even more back as a driver as well. So thank you.
Me too.
Good
Thanks.
stuff. Well done today and good luck tomorrow.
Au revoir.
Au revoir, à bientôt. Oh, wow. He has not changed, has
Formula
he? Not
One without
bit.
Daniel Ricciardo is not really Formula One, is it?
That's magic, isn't it? It's so good. Now, listen, from one beaming driver there to one who I'd imagine is not particularly happy at all. He had absolutely no grip out there, ended up in the gravel, retiring the car. This is Sergio Perez.
Hey, Checo, just what happened? Where did your rear tyres go?
No, we had a lot of damage from Lewis.
Okay.
He basically took the whole right-hand side of the car. So once we realized about the damage, we retired.
What do you make of that incident? He obviously got a 5-second time penalty, but what do you think of his...
Well, that meant game over on my race. Yeah, anyway, I look forward for tomorrow. Hopefully tomorrow we can recover those points.
Thank you.
A bad afternoon for Sergio Perez, saying there was damage to the car after the contact with Hamilton. Sam's going to just unpack that for us in the studio in just a mo as well. How did you see it, Will?
He was dropping back before the damage started to occur, so or before the damage well, the contact happened with Lewis. We haven't managed to speak to anyone from the team, so no confirmation of exactly what the damage was or how bad that was. But yeah. Be interesting to see how that one is unpacked. Yeah, I have no idea because we haven't spoken to the team yet, so it'd be interesting to know exactly what the damage was to the car. But he was certainly starting to fall back. I mean, he was great at the start of the race, absolutely mega. But as soon as we came back from being under the safety car, he was just dropping like a stone. And we know those mediums. You've got to look after them. Had he taken too much out of them in pushing early on until that safety car? I'm not sure. There's only one person that knows probably, and that's Checo.
Quite the moves by the Ferraris to get round him as well. We were sort of yelping laps 6 and 7 when he was tumbling down the order. The moves that were being made at various parts of the track were incredible.
Absolutely, but look, if you've got no rear grip, if you've abused those rear tyres, then trying to get the traction down on a slippery track surface, coming out of the corners, trying to get your grip going through the corner, you've just got no grip anywhere at all, and that that was really showing for him, particularly on the traction events, particularly coming out of the corners. Just nothing he could do really, a sitting duck in the end. But that speaks certainly where he was getting past, speaks to having overworked those rear tyres, and that was what he was complaining about, no rear grip, which speaks to me of abusing those rear tyres. But as I said, only one person knows. Well, the team will know, so hopefully we can speak to someone from the team, but Checo will know himself as well. And if he says it was damage from Lewis, then I have to take him on his word.
Absolutely, and a few, certainly in commentary and down here as well, undecided on whether it was a penalty, it was a racing incident. Sam is going to unpack that incident now between Lewis Hamilton and Sergio Perez in the studio.
Lewis Hamilton and Sergio Perez came together on track during the Belgian GP sprint, and quite a few people were wondering, why did Lewis Hamilton pick up a 5-second penalty for that incident, myself included? So I decided to take a look back at the onboard cameras, and they're incredibly revealing to see what happens. Now, bearing in mind that Lewis Hamilton came out of the pits on a new set of intermediates, while Sergio Perez was on a used set of intermediates. Questions about that to come, I'm sure. But coming into one of the penultimate big corners, the Stavilo corner of the circuit, this long right-hander, Lewis Hamilton gets a really good run up the inside of Sergio Perez. You can see the Red Bull's front end just here on the left. And it looks to everybody that Hamilton's got the line into the corner, nice and easy. He can get through, get the job done, quite straightforward. But let's play it through to see what happened. And you can see the English driver gets a move on, then biff, hits the side of the Red Bull. Seems like a racing incident, right? Well, let's play that back a little bit more slowly, and you can wind it back. You can see the Red Bull just where it started again. Now, we come forward, but look at this point. If we go back a bit further, you can see Hamilton's going for the apex of the corner, going for the traditional racing line, which would be absolutely fine if there wasn't a car just on your outside, wheel to wheel of you. And you can see the Mercedes just gets its right front wheel up onto that red and yellow painted curb. Don't forget, that's soaking wet. There's no grip there. And you can see a puff of the water coming off the right front tyre of the Mercedes. Suddenly, no grip from the right front corner of the car. And you can see in Hamilton's steering, he feels that loss of grip. And as we come through the corner, you'll see him make the smallest correction just there. That little movement on the steering, split second of correction. But it's enough to bring the car, with the forces on the car anyway, to bring it slightly off the curb. And look, Perez is right there. Hamilton goes right into the side of the Red Bull, eats a whole chunk of the floor, and really sensitive aerodynamic part, and takes a chunk out of the side of Perez's Red Bull. You can just see it there under the A of Oracle. Now, that damage is what caused Sergio Perez to retire from the sprint. It's not immediately apparent there how severe the damage was, but when we take a look later at the retired car, you can see a huge chunk of bodywork removed from the side of the Red Bull, spread now somewhere in the Belgian countryside. But you can also see here on the brand new Red Bull cooling system, of course, they introduced that last time out in Hungary, you actually see tyre marks on the edge of some of the cooling parts underneath the bodywork. So I'd be absolutely astonished if areas like this, where you've got all that beautiful welding that someone spent a huge amount of time on to put those coolers together, has just had a little crack and they started to lose cooling pressure on the back of that Red Bull. And that loss of coolant could have caused the power unit to fail, or all sorts of other problems under the back of the Red Bull. So they simply had to retire the car. But absolutely vast damage on the back of the number 11 Red Bull. So did that really constitute a 5-second penalty? Well, I think if you follow the book exactly, it was Hamilton perhaps getting a little bit too much on the curb, a little too aggressive, and it was a slight error from the multiple world champion that put him in the side of that Red Bull. But I do think it's a little harsh, but I can see why the FIA reached that conclusion. Will, Laura, what do you think? Because it's a difficult one, but I do see why the penalty was introduced.
Will, a little harsh is what Sam Collins is saying. Before we came to that analysis with the onboard and you saw it again in slow motion and through the angles, you were saying definitely not a penalty. And Toto Wolff, can I just say, it's just walked past us and equally peered in to our return monitor here to have a look as well.
I'm not sure if he was watching the move back or if he was actually having a little look inside the Red Bull, because that was quite a nice view inside what they're doing with their cooling there. Look, we have sprint races because they wanted to promote gutsy races with punchy overtaking, and then you penalise for punchy overtaking. What that does show is the damage to the car, which Checo was talking about. So clearly big damage to the car, but it's not, I don't think it's worthy of a 5-second penalty. It's racing. It's wheel-to-wheel racing. I don't know, if you penalise every side-by-side move, I don't know. I think I will go with Sam to say it's just veering into not a penalty, I think. But it's fine margins. But I will still stand by. Checo was struggling before any damage happened, and the thing that he was complaining about, losing rear grip, was way before that. Way before that.
Toto Wolff coming past and saying definitely a racing incident, as you'd expect the team principal of Mercedes to say. Well, from sort of a bit of a torrid afternoon for the likes of Sergio Perez, and indeed the 5-second penalty for Lewis Hamilton, to a driver who was absolutely delighted come the checkered flag. That is Pierre Gasly in P3.
Pierre, great to see you smiling again after what was a mega result. Just how satisfying is it to finish on the top three?
I'm super happy. I'm super happy for the whole team. You know, we've been pretty unlucky in the recent events, and then we managed to put a very strong qualifying this morning, put it in P6. took the risk at the right time, fit the inters, and yeah, fight until the end to try to hold on Lewis right behind. So it was an intense race, but I really enjoyed these conditions, and then yeah, it's a sprint race, it's a sprint podium. It doesn't feel quite like a real podium, but I still take the little third plate, and then I think the most important is more for the team, for the guys, the mood inside the garage, and that's why I'm really happy.
Yeah, you mentioned the team was such a difficult day for you guys yesterday with all the news that was happening. How good is this for the morale for the team and encouraging for tomorrow as well?
Yeah, I mean, especially knowing that the guys are gonna go on a break in about 48 hours, and it's been, it hasn't been easy since the start of the year. We haven't been as competitive as we would have liked, and Hungary was a bit of an example of what's happening since the start. We got involved in a collision, lost the 2 cars, so it was quite a heavy and frustrating last couple of weeks, and to be able to put a strong performance at this time, and also personally in Spa, which is obviously a very special track. With Antoine and what's happened, the history of the track, it's a very meaningful third place.
Congrats.
Thank you.
Oh, you can see how much it means to Pierre Gasly, and especially here in Spa. Of course, he paid tribute to Antoine Hubert at the top of Eau Rouge with a run for Antoine on Thursday night in the pouring rain. This place obviously, holds a dear place in his heart for a number of reasons. And look, a great result for him, and goodness me, did Alpine need that this weekend? The distraction they've got off track at the moment, it makes the result even more impressive.
Yeah, but it also shows that, Sunday night, Alain Permain, after 34 years, is leaving the team. And yet today, as sporting director, he helped call that thing perfectly for them and helped take them to a third place. So, just the absolute professionalism of someone like Alain Permain to the very last second for that team. He'll be giving it, his all. And that's the kind of person that they're going to miss now they've got rid of him. Sorry, mutually agreed that he should leave the team.
Thank you. From P3 to P2 for Oscar Piastri, and a sprint race podium for him in his rookie year. He momentarily led the race. Well, it's been a great weekend so far for Oscar Piastri, hasn't it?
Oh, come on. I mean, it's the weekend where all of the hype around Oscar Piastri, and there was so much, almost to the extent that he couldn't live up to the expectations. The fight that erupted over him last year between Alpine and McLaren, everybody's saying this is a guy who's won every championship that he's ever contested, the likes of which we've never seen. Better than Russell, better than Norris, better than Leclerc coming through the junior formulas. How are you supposed to live up to that kind of hype? And then in a car and at a team that was struggling all the way through the season, they finally get the upgrades. Lando, pop on the podium. Oscar's in the shadow, and he comes here this weekend and in the most treacherous of conditions just lays it down. It's been magnificent. It's been absolutely wonderful. I love these moments when you see somebody that know's got it, know's got something special, and you just see them deliver it. It's superb.
What's possible for Oscar tomorrow?
Sky's the limit for this guy, I mean, I don't think it's too far off, someone like when Verstappen turned up with all of the hype around him from junior formulas, and it was in those early races, in those early wet races, where he started to show his form. You look back even to the 1980s, so much hype around a young guy called Ayrton Senna, and you get to the Monaco Grand Prix in '84, and who is the guy who was absolutely tearing through the field? It was Ayrton Senna, and also that day a young guy, Stefan Beloff, who was absolutely flying through the field. Those kind of conditions, young kids showing everybody up and showing what they can do in these great circuits on these great tracks. I mean, particularly when you think of Stefan Beloff, you sadly think of Spa as well. But it's when the car doesn't make the difference and the driver does, and that's what they always say about the rain, is that you can really see the driver make the difference. And he is doing, and he's proving everyone right. We saw Mark Webber this morning, who's his manager, and I haven't seen Mark bouncing through the podium since he was winning Grand Prix for Red Bull Racing. I haven't seen him this happy in like a decade. And Oscar and his whole family, they're lovely. They're very humble, and they just get on with it, and he keeps his head down. he's not the big I am. He's not, he's not full of ego. He's just, he just gets on with it. He's something very special.
Yeah, he really is. George Russell there causing absolute mayhem behind us as we reach the end of the show. And look, Max Verstappen once again reigns supreme with that thrilling overtake to retake the lead from Oscar Piastri. And he heads into tomorrow's race, of course, starting from P6 on the grid thanks to that gearbox penalty. But I'm pretty sure he'll be able to overtake it. Here's how race day looks then. 2 p.m. for your pre-race show. And then the Belgian Grand Prix at 3 p.m. The post-race show will be immediately after the podium, and Charles Leclerc will be on pole here in Spa. Well, there we have it, the sprint race. Pretty chaotic in the end, wasn't it? Very eventful over a number of maybe reduced laps, but they were certainly action-packed. Max Verstappen wins the sprint race here. Brilliant results for Oscar Piastri and Pierre Gasly. We'll see you tomorrow.